Sarah Mitchell pushed through the heavy glass door of Romano's Italian restaurant at exactly 2:45 in the afternoon. She was 15 minutes early for her shift, just like always. The smell of garlic bread and tomato sauce filled her nose as she walked toward the back room where employees kept their things. Her feet hurt already, and she hadn't even started working yet. That's what happened when you work 2 shifts in one day, 5 days a week. She tied her long brown hair into a tight bun and checked her reflection in the small mirror hanging on the wall. Dark circles sat under her green eyes. She was only 24 years old, but sometimes she felt much older. She put on her black apron and wrote her name on the staff board. Sarah Mitchell, Thursday evening shift. Table section 3. The restaurant was quiet now, in that strange time between lunch and dinner when only a few customers sat scattered around the big dining room. Old Mrs. Patterson sat in her usual corner, slowly eating soup and reading a thick book. A young couple shared a pizza near the window. The afternoon sun came through the glass, making everything look golden and warm. Sarah walked to her section and started checking the tables. She made sure each one had clean silverware, folded napkins, salt and pepper shakers filled up, and fresh flowers in small glass vases. This was her routine. She had done it so many times that her hands moved without her really thinking about it. Romano's was not a fancy restaurant, but it was nice. The owners had spent a lot of money 2 months ago to make it look better. They painted the walls a soft cream color. They bought new red tablecloths. They hung paintings of Italian countryside scenes. And they did something that surprised everyone who worked there. They bought a grand piano. The piano sat in the corner of the dining room near the big stone fireplace. It was beautiful, shiny and black with smooth curved edges. The owners said it would make the restaurant feel more elegant, more special. They imagined that someone would play soft music while people ate their pasta and drank their wine. But most nights, the piano just sat there silent. Sometimes on weekends, a customer would ask if they could play it. Usually it was someone who had drunk too much wine, who would sit down and play Happy Birthday badly while everyone clapped and laughed. The piano deserved better than that, Sarah thought. But she never said anything out loud. At 3 o'clock, more servers arrived for the dinner shift. Maria came in, talking loudly on her phone. Then came James, who was studying business at the local college. Then Tommy, who always made jokes and tried to make everyone laugh even when they were too tired to smile. "Hey, Sarah," Tommy said, tying his apron. "You look exhausted." "Another double shift?" Sarah nodded. She had worked the morning shift from 6 in the morning until 2 in the afternoon. She went home for 45 minutes, just enough time to change her clothes and eat something quick. Now she was back for the dinner shift, which would last until 11 at night. Tomorrow she would do the same thing again. "You work too much," Maria said, putting her phone in her pocket. "When do you rest?" "I rest on Sundays," Sarah said, but that wasn't really true. On Sundays she did laundry, cleaned her small apartment, and visited her mother at the assisted living facility across town. Rest was something she had forgotten how to do. By 5:30, the restaurant started to fill up. This was when the dinner crowd came. Families with children who were loud and messy. Couples on dates who held hands across the table. Groups of friends celebrating birthdays or anniversaries. Business people in suits who checked their phones between bites of food. Sarah moved between tables with practiced ease. She took orders, brought drinks, carried heavy trays of hot food, refilled water glasses, cleared away dirty plates. She smiled at customers even when they were rude. She laughed at their jokes even when they weren't funny. She was good at her job because she had been doing it for 3 years. 3 years. Sometimes it felt like 3 days, and sometimes it felt like 30 years. Sarah hadn't always been a waitress. Before this, she had been something else. Someone else. But she tried not to think about that anymore. Thinking about the past just made her chest feel tight, and her eyes sting with tears she couldn't let fall. Not here, not during her shift when she needed to smile and be pleasant. At 7 o'clock, Mr. Romano himself came out from his office. He was a large man with a round belly and a thick gray mustache. He walked through the restaurant, stopping at tables to ask customers if they were enjoying their meals. This was something he did every night. He believed it made people feel special. "Sarah," he called out as she passed by with a tray of dirty dishes. "How are you tonight?" "I'm good, Mr. Romano," she said. It was a lie, but a small one, the kind of lie that made life easier. "You're my best worker, you know that?" he said, patting her shoulder. "Always on time, always working hard, never complaining. I wish everyone was like you. Sarah smiled and thanked him, but inside she felt empty. Being the best worker at a restaurant wasn't the dream she used to have. It wasn't what she had wanted to become. But life had a way of changing dreams into something smaller, something that fit into the tiny space left after all the hard things happened. By 8 o'clock, the restaurant was completely full. Every table was taken. The noise of conversations mixed with the sound of forks and knives hitting plates, glasses clinking together, chairs scraping against the floor. The kitchen was hot and busy with the cook shouting orders back and forth. Sarah's feet hurt so much now that each step felt like walking on broken glass. Her lower back ached. Her shoulders were tight and sore from carrying heavy trays, but she kept moving, kept smiling, kept working. Then, at 8:30, something different happened. An elderly man walked into the restaurant alone. He was probably in his 70s with neat white hair and a carefully trimmed white beard. He wore an expensive-looking dark blue suit and shiny black shoes. He carried himself in a way that made people notice him, not because he was loud or flashy, but because he seemed calm and important. Maria seated him at a table in Sarah's section, near the piano. Sarah brought him water and a menu, asked him if he wanted wine. He ordered a glass of red wine and said he would need a few minutes to look at the menu. His voice was gentle but clear, the voice of someone who was used to being listened to. Sarah brought him his wine and took his order. He wanted the chicken marsala with a side salad. Simple, classic. She wrote it down and took the order to the kitchen. The evening continued in its usual rhythm. Sarah moved between her tables, making sure everyone had what they needed. The elderly man ate his meal slowly, seeming to enjoy every bite. He wasn't in a hurry like most customers. He looked relaxed, like he had all the time in the world. Around 9:15, after most people had finished eating and were having coffee or dessert, the elderly man raised his hand slightly to get Sarah's attention. She walked over to his table. "Yes, sir, can I get you anything else?" she asked. "That was an excellent meal," he said, wiping his mouth with his napkin. "Please give my compliments to the chef." "I will, thank you," Sarah said. The man looked over at the piano in the corner. "That's a beautiful instrument," he said. "Does anyone play it?" Sarah followed his gaze. "Sometimes customers play it, but not very often." "That's a shame," the man said. "A piano like that should be played. It's a Steinway, if I'm not mistaken. Very fine quality." He paused, then looked back at Sarah. "Do you happen to know if someone here could play something? Something classical? I would enjoy that very much with my coffee." Sarah felt her heart skip a beat. She looked around the restaurant. None of the other servers played piano. Mr. Romano didn't play. The cook certainly didn't play. The only person in this entire building who could play classical music on that piano was her. But she hadn't played in so long. 6 years. No, longer than that. 6 years since she had played seriously, but several months since she had touched a piano at all. "I'll ask around," Sarah said quietly. She walked to the back where the other servers were getting drinks and preparing dessert orders. "Does anyone here play piano?" she asked, even though she already knew the answer. They all shook their heads. "Why?" Tommy asked. "A customer wants to hear some classical music," Sarah said. Maria laughed. "Tell him to use his phone. He can play whatever music he wants on his phone." But Sarah knew that wasn't the same thing. Live music was different. The sound of real fingers on real keys filling a real room with real notes. That was something you couldn't get from a phone. Mr. Romano came into the back area having heard the conversation. "We have a customer who wants piano music?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah said. He asked if anyone could play something classical. Mr. Romano thought for a moment, then smiled. "You can play, Sarah. I remember you told me that once when I first hired you. You said you used to play piano." Sarah felt her face get hot. She had mentioned it once, years ago, during her job interview when Mr. Romano asked about her hobbies and interests. She had said it so quickly, so quietly, hoping he would move past it, and he had until now. "That was a long time ago," Sarah said. "I don't really play anymore." "But you can, right?" Mr. Romano said. "You know how?" Sarah nodded slowly. Yes, she knew how. Her fingers knew how. Her hands knew how. Her whole body knew how, even after all this time. "Then play something for him," Mr. Romano said. "It will be good for the restaurant. It will make the place feel special. Come on, Sarah, just one song." All the other servers were looking at her now. Maria smiled and gave her an encouraging nod. Tommy said, "I didn't know you could play piano." "That's so cool." Sarah felt trapped. She couldn't say no without explaining why, and she didn't want to explain. She didn't want to talk about Juilliard, about the scholarship, about her father, about all the dreams that had died 6 years ago. Those were private things, painful things, things she had buried deep inside where they couldn't hurt her anymore. "Okay," she heard herself say. "I'll play something." Mr. Romano clapped his hands together, pleased. "Wonderful. Go ahead, take off your apron. Make it nice." Sarah untied her apron with shaking hands. She walked slowly back through the restaurant toward the elderly man's table. Her heart was beating so fast she could hear it in her ears. Her mouth felt dry. "I can play something for you," she said to the man, her voice barely above a whisper. His face lit up with genuine pleasure. "Oh, how wonderful." "Thank you, my dear. Do you know any Chopin? Chopin?" Of course he would ask for Chopin. The universe had a terrible sense of humor. "Yes," Sarah said. "I know some Chopin. The Nocturne in E-flat major, perhaps. Opus 9, number 2? If you know it, of course. If not, anything you'd like to play would be lovely." Sarah's hands went cold. The Nocturne in E-flat major. That piece. Of all the pieces in the world, he had asked for that one. That was the piece she had played at her last competition. The night before everything changed. The night before her father collapsed at breakfast and never woke up. The night before her life split into before and after. "I know it," she said. She walked to the piano like she was walking to her own execution. Other customers had noticed something was happening and were starting to pay attention. The noise in the restaurant was getting quieter as people turned to watch the waitress walking toward the beautiful black piano in the corner. Sarah stood in front of the piano for a moment. She reached out and lifted the cover that protected the keys. The keys were white and black, clean and perfect, waiting. She pulled out the bench and sat down slowly. She adjusted the height slightly, the way she had been taught to do a lifetime ago. The restaurant was almost completely quiet now. Everyone was watching. Sarah could feel their eyes on her back. She wanted to run away. She wanted to disappear. But her hands were already moving to the keys, already finding their position, already remembering. She took a deep breath. Then she began to play. The first note came out soft and gentle, like a whisper in the dark. Sarah's right hand played the melody, while her left hand provided the harmony underneath. The opening of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major was like a question being asked quietly, carefully, hoping for an answer. For the first few seconds, Sarah's hands felt stiff and awkward. Her fingers didn't want to curve the right way. The movements felt strange, like trying to write with the wrong hand. 6 years was a long time. 6 years of not practicing, not playing, not touching a piano except for a few times when she couldn't help herself, when the need for music became too strong and she would find a piano somewhere and play for just a few minutes before running away again. But then, something started to happen. Her fingers began to remember. Muscle memory was a real thing, she realized. Her hands knew this piece even if her mind was full of fear and doubt. They knew where to go, which keys to press, how hard, how soft, how long to hold each note. The melody started to flow more naturally. The beautiful, sad tune of the Nocturne filled the restaurant. It wasn't a loud piece. Chopin had written it to be played softly, delicately, like moonlight falling on water. But even though it was quiet, it had power. It had emotion. It had something that made people stop and listen. Sarah's eyes closed without her meaning to close them. This was something she used to do when she played, back when she was younger. Her piano teacher, Mrs. Chen, had told her it was okay to close her eyes if it helped her feel the music better. Some pianists kept their eyes open, watching their hands. But Sarah had always been the type to close her eyes and go inside herself, to the place where the music lived. With her eyes closed, she wasn't in the restaurant anymore. She wasn't a waitress wearing a uniform with sore feet and an aching back. She was just a person playing a piano, letting the music come through her fingers, letting it tell its story. The Nocturne had a shape to it, like a conversation or a journey. It started soft and gentle, asking questions. Then it grew a little stronger, a little more confident. Then it became more complex, with the melody weaving in and out, going up and down, dancing around the harmony. There were moments where both hands played together in perfect agreement, and moments where they seemed to argue with each other, the right hand singing one thing while the left hand insisted on something else. Sarah had always loved this about music. It could be many different emotions at the same time. It could be sad and beautiful together. It could be peaceful and painful together. It could make you feel things you didn't even have words for. As she played, something inside her chest began to crack open. It was like a door that had been locked for years was suddenly being pushed. Slowly, carefully, until light started coming through the gap. She had locked away so much. The grief about her father. The anger about having to give up her dreams. The sadness about who she used to be and who she had become. The guilt about feeling like she had let everyone down, especially herself. All of those feelings were in her fingers now, pouring out through the keys, becoming music instead of words. The melody seemed to carry her tears, the ones she hadn't let herself cry for so long because crying wouldn't pay the bills or help her mother or get her brother through college. The harmony seemed to carry her longing, the deep ache for the life she had wanted, the stages she had dreamed of playing on, the music she had wanted to make. In the restaurant, something remarkable was happening. Every single person had stopped what they were doing. Forks were frozen halfway to mouths. Conversations had died mid-sentence. Even the young children, who had been noisy and restless all evening, sat still and quiet, somehow understanding that something important was occurring. The couple by the window held hands tighter, tears forming in the woman's eyes though she didn't know why. Old Mrs. Patterson closed her book and removed her reading glasses, listening with her whole body leaned slightly forward. The business people in their suits forgot about their phones and their deals and their stress, just for these few minutes, just while the music played. In the kitchen, the cooks had stopped cooking. They stood near the doorway, watching through the small window, spatulas and spoons hanging forgotten in their hands. Even the dishwasher, a quiet young man from Guatemala who barely spoke English, had turned off the water and come to listen. Maria had tears running down her face. She didn't try to wipe them away. Tommy stood with his mouth slightly open, completely shocked. He had worked with Sarah for 2 years and had no idea she could do this. Mr. Romano stood near the back, his arms crossed, nodding slowly like he was understanding something important about his employee that he had never known before. And the elderly man who had made the request sat very still at his table, his coffee growing cold, completely forgotten. His eyes were closed too, and on his face was an expression of deep concentration, mixed with something that looked almost like pain, but wasn't pain. It was the expression of someone hearing something they had been waiting to hear for a very long time. Sarah reached the middle section of the nocturne, where the melody climbed higher and became more intense. Her right hand stretched across the keys, playing notes that sparkled and shimmered. This was the part that had always challenged her when she was younger, the part where her teacher would make her practice over and over until her hands cramped and her back hurt from sitting so long. But now, her hands knew what to do. They stretched and reached and found each note exactly where it needed to be. The crescendo built and built, getting stronger and more passionate, and then suddenly it softened again, pulling back, becoming gentle once more, like someone who had shouted their pain and then collapsed into whispers. The piece moved into its final section. This was where Chopin showed his genius, Sarah had always thought. Instead of ending with something loud and dramatic, he brought everything back to where it started. The melody returned to its original quiet question, but now it seemed different. It seemed sadder somehow, more knowing, like it had lived through something difficult and come out changed. Sarah's left hand played the low bass notes that anchored the harmony while her right hand played the melody one last time, decorating it with little ornaments and trills that made it sound like a bird singing its last song before night fell. Her fingers moved faster in some spots, slower in others, pushing and pulling the tempo the way Chopin had intended, the way that made the music breathe like a living thing. She had forgotten how good this felt. Not just playing the piano, but playing it well, playing it the way she had been trained to play, with her whole heart and soul and body involved, not just her fingers. This was what she had lost when she stopped playing. Not just the skill, but the feeling. The connection to something bigger than herself. The sense that she was part of something important and beautiful and real. The final phrase approached. Sarah's hands moved through it with tender care, playing each note like it was precious and fragile. The melody descended slowly, step by step, note by note, moving down and down until it reached the final chord. She held that chord for a long moment, letting it ring out in the silent restaurant, letting it fade naturally, slowly, until it dissolved into nothing. Her hands lifted off the keys. The last vibrations of sound faded into the air and disappeared. Everything was completely silent. Sarah sat very still with her eyes closed. She was afraid to open them, afraid to come back to reality. For these few minutes she had been free. She had been herself again, her real self, the self she had buried and tried to forget. Now she would have to put that self away again. Go back to being just a waitress with sore feet and an aching back, someone who served food and cleaned tables and tried not to think about what might have been. Then the applause started. It began with the elderly man. He put down his coffee cup carefully and started clapping, slow and steady and strong. Then others joined in. The couple by the window, old Mrs. Patterson, the business people, the families with children. Everyone in the restaurant was clapping, and then they weren't just clapping, they were standing up. A standing ovation. In a small Italian restaurant on a Thursday night. For a waitress who had played one song, Sarah opened her eyes. She felt dizzy and disoriented, like she had been somewhere far away and was suddenly pulled back. She turned slightly on the piano bench and saw all these people standing and clapping for her. Some were smiling. Some were crying. All of them were looking at her like she had given them something valuable, something they hadn't expected to receive tonight. Her face got hot. She stood up quickly, feeling embarrassed and exposed. She gave a small, awkward bow, not sure what else to do. The applause continued. Mr. Romano was clapping the loudest, beaming with pride like she was his daughter who had just graduated from college. Sarah closed the piano cover carefully, gently like she was tucking in a child to sleep. She turned and walked quickly back toward the kitchen area, needing to escape all these eyes, all this attention. But as she passed the elderly man's table, he reached out and lightly touched her arm, stopping her. "Please," he said softly. "Just a moment." Sarah stopped. Up close, she could see his eyes were watery with tears, though he was smiling. "That was extraordinary," he said. His voice was thick with emotion. "Truly extraordinary." "You have remarkable talent," the man said. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a small card. "My name is Marcus Chen. I'm retired now, but I used to work in music. I'd like to talk with you more if you're willing. Could we perhaps meet for coffee tomorrow morning? I have something I'd like to discuss with you." Sarah took the card with shaking hands. It was cream-colored, expensive-looking paper with simple black text. Marcus Chen, music consultant. There was a phone number and an email address, nothing else. "I work tomorrow morning," Sarah said. "My shift starts at 6. What time do you finish?" Marcus asked. 2 o'clock, Sarah said. "Perfect. There's a coffee shop called Rosie's on 4th Street. Do you know it? Could you meet me there at 2:30? Sarah looked at the card, then at Marcus Chen's kind, serious face. Part of her wanted to say no. Part of her wanted to throw the card away and pretend this night had never happened. Going back to how things were would be easier than letting hope creep in again. But another part of her, a part she thought had died a long time ago, was whispering yes. "Yes, meet him. Yes, see what he wants. Yes, take the chance. Okay," Sarah said. 2:30 tomorrow. Marcus smiled and his whole face lit up. "Wonderful. Thank you. And thank you for the beautiful music tonight. You gave an old man a gift he didn't expect to receive." Sarah nodded and walked quickly to the back of the restaurant. Maria grabbed her as soon as she came through the door, hugging her tight. "That was amazing," Maria said. "I didn't know you could play like that. Why didn't you ever tell us?" Tommy was shaking his head in disbelief. "Seriously, Sarah, that was incredible. You should be playing in concert halls or something, not working here." Mr. Romano came over, still grinning. "Sarah, that was wonderful for business. Everyone loved it. Maybe you could play every Thursday night, what do you think? We could advertise it, get more customers." Sarah felt overwhelmed by all the attention, all the questions, all the expectations suddenly being placed on her. "I need to get back to work," she said, putting her apron back on with trembling fingers. "My tables probably need things." She escaped back to the dining room floor. Several customers stopped her to say how much they had enjoyed the music. She smiled and thanked them, but inside she felt like she was falling apart. That door in her chest that had cracked open during the performance was still open, and all the feelings she had kept locked away were spilling out, making her feel raw and vulnerable and scared. She went to Marcus Chen's table to bring him his check, but he had already left cash on the table with a very generous tip, much more than the cost of his meal. He had written a note on the receipt. "Tomorrow, 2:30. Please come. This is important." Sarah folded the note and put it in her apron pocket. She cleared his table, wiped it down, and set it up for new customers. The restaurant was starting to empty out now. It was getting late. People paid their bills and left, many of them stopping to tell Sarah again how much they had enjoyed her playing. By 11 o'clock, the last customers had gone. Sarah and the other servers cleaned up, restocked supplies, and prepared the restaurant for the next day. Her hands moved through the familiar tasks automatically, wiping tables, sweeping floors, refilling salt shakers, folding napkins, but her mind was somewhere else. She was thinking about the feeling of her fingers on the piano keys. She was thinking about the music pouring out of her hands. She was thinking about Marcus Chen's card in her pocket and the meeting tomorrow. She was thinking about the look on everyone's faces when she played, like she had given them something beautiful they hadn't known they needed. Most of all, she was thinking about how alive she had felt during those few minutes at the piano. How real, how like herself, her true self. The self she had been before life got hard, and dreams got small and survival became the only goal that mattered. When she finally drove home to her small apartment at midnight, she was exhausted in a way that went beyond physical tiredness. It was like she had run an emotional marathon. She fell into bed without even changing out of her clothes, but she couldn't sleep. Her mind was too full. Her heart was beating too fast. She pulled Marcus Chen's card out of her apron pocket and looked at it in the dim light coming through her window. Music consultant. What did that even mean? What could he possibly want to talk to her about? Was this some kind of trick? Did he want something from her? But his eyes had been kind. His voice had been genuine. And the way he had listened to her playing, the way his whole body had been focused and attentive, that wasn't fake. That was real appreciation, real understanding. Sarah set the card on her nightstand and stared at the ceiling. Tomorrow she would work her morning shift. She would serve breakfast and lunch to customers. She would smile and carry trays and pretend everything was normal. And then at 2:30 she would go to Rosie's coffee shop and find out what Marcus Chen wanted to tell her. She was terrified. But she was also, for the first time in 6 years, something else. Something she barely recognized because it had been gone for so long. She was hopeful. Sarah woke up at 5 in the morning, just like she did every Friday. Her alarm clock buzzed loudly in the dark room. She reached over and turned it off, then lay still for a moment, trying to remember why her chest felt so tight and her stomach felt so nervous. Then she remembered. The piano, the performance last night, Marcus Chen, the meeting at 2:30. She sat up and rubbed her face with both hands. Had last night really happened? It felt like a dream now, something she might have imagined. But no, it was real. She could still feel the piano keys under her fingers if she thought about it. She could still hear the sound of the nocturne filling the restaurant. Sarah got out of bed and got ready for work. She showered, brushed her teeth, put on her uniform, black pants, white shirt, comfortable shoes that would hold up through 6 hours of walking. She made instant coffee and drank it while standing at her kitchen counter, looking out the window at the dark street below. The sun wouldn't rise for another hour. The drive to Romano's was quiet. Most people were still sleeping. Only a few cars were on the road, mostly other people heading to early morning jobs. Sarah parked in the employee lot behind the restaurant and walked in through the back door. The kitchen staff was already there, preparing for breakfast service. The smell of bacon and coffee filled the air. "Morning, Sarah," called out Pete, the head cook. He was a big man with tattoos covering both arms. That was some fancy piano playing last night. Didn't know you had it in you. "Thanks, Pete," Sarah said, tying her apron. "My wife wanted me to record it on my phone, but I forgot," Pete said, cracking eggs into a bowl. "She loves Chopin. Used to play piano herself when she was young." Sarah nodded and smiled, then escaped to the dining room before he could ask more questions. She wasn't ready to talk about it yet. She didn't know what to say. The whole thing felt too big, too complicated, too full of emotion she wasn't ready to handle at 5:30 in the morning. The breakfast shift was steady, but not too busy. Romano's served breakfast on weekdays for people heading to work, people who wanted coffee and pancakes or eggs and toast before starting their day. Sarah worked on autopilot, taking orders and bringing food and refilling coffee cups. Her mind kept drifting to the meeting this afternoon. What did Marcus Chen want? Maybe he just wanted to be kind, to encourage her. Old people sometimes did that, she thought. They saw young people with talent and they wanted to offer advice, to share their wisdom. That was probably all this was. A nice conversation over coffee, some encouraging words, and then life would go back to normal. But something in her gut told her it might be more than that. The way he had looked at her. The way he had said this is important in his note. The fact that he had given her a business card that said he worked in music. These things suggested he had something specific in mind, something real to discuss. Around noon, Sarah started to feel sick with nervousness. Her hands shook slightly as she poured coffee. Her stomach felt like it was tied in knots. She couldn't eat lunch even though she knew she should. Food just wouldn't go down, Maria noticed. "You okay?" she asked during a quiet moment. "You look pale." "I'm fine," Sarah said. "Just tired." "You're meeting that old man from last night, aren't you?" Maria said. She was smart, always paying attention. "That's why you're nervous." Sarah didn't answer, which was answer enough. "You should go," Maria said firmly. "Whatever he wants to talk about, you should listen. Something good might come from it. Or nothing might come from it," Sarah said. "Probably nothing will come from it. But what if something does?" Maria said. "You won't know unless you go." At 2 o'clock, Sarah's shift ended. She clocked out, changed out of her uniform into regular clothes, jeans and a simple blue sweater, and got in her car. Rosie's coffee shop was only 10 minutes away. Sarah got there at 2:20, 10 minutes early. She sat in her car for a few minutes, trying to calm her racing heart. She looked at herself in the rearview mirror. She looked tired. The dark circles under her eyes seemed darker than usual. Her hair was messy from being in a bun all morning. She tried to fix it a little, running her fingers through it, but it didn't help much. At 2:28, she got out of the car and walked into the coffee shop. Rosie's was a small, cozy place with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. It smelled like fresh coffee and baked goods. Soft jazz music played from speakers in the corners. Marcus Chen was already there, sitting at a table near the window. He was reading a newspaper, his reading glasses perched on his nose. When Sarah walked in, he looked up and smiled, folding the newspaper and setting it aside. "Sarah," he said, standing up. "Thank you for coming. Please sit down. Can I get you something to drink?" "Coffee? Tea?" "Coffee is fine," Sarah said, sitting down across from him. "Just black." Marcus went to the counter and ordered 2 coffees. While he was gone, Sarah looked around nervously. The coffee shop was half full. A few people working on laptops, a couple of college students studying, an older woman knitting in the corner. Normal people doing normal things on a normal Friday afternoon. Marcus came back with 2 steaming mugs and sat down. "How was your morning shift?" he asked. "It was fine," Sarah said. "Busy enough." "I imagine you're wondering why I asked you here," Marcus said, getting straight to the point. Sarah appreciated that. She didn't want to make small talk. She wanted to know what this was about. "Yes," she said simply. Marcus took a sip of his coffee, then set the mug down carefully. "Let me start by telling you a bit about myself. I told you last night that I worked in music. That was a simplification. I was the director of the Metropolitan Orchestra for 30 years. I retired 2 years ago." Sarah's eyes widened. The Metropolitan Orchestra. That was one of the most prestigious orchestras in the country. Directors of orchestras like that were incredibly important people in the classical music world. And this man, sitting across from her in a casual coffee shop, had been in charge of it for 3 decades. "I've spent my entire life around music," Marcus continued. "Around musicians. Around people with talent. I like to think I know talent when I hear it. And last night, Sarah, I heard something remarkable. Not just technical skill, though you clearly have that, but something deeper. Something that can't be taught. The ability to make music speak, to make it communicate emotion directly to people's hearts." Sarah felt her throat getting tight. She took a sip of coffee to give herself a moment. "Tell me about your background," Marcus said gently. "Where did you train? Why are you working as a waitress instead of performing?" This was the question Sarah had been dreading, the one she didn't want to answer. But Marcus was looking at her with such genuine interest, such kindness, that she found herself starting to talk. "I started playing when I was 5, she said slowly. "My mother enrolled me in lessons because I was always making up songs, always tapping out rhythms on everything. My first teacher was Mrs. Henderson. She taught me for 3 years, then said I needed someone more advanced." Sarah paused, taking another sip of coffee. Marcus waited patiently, not rushing her. "So I went to Mrs. Chen, no relation to you, I assume, who was one of the best piano teachers in the city. She was strict but amazing. She taught me for 10 years, from age 8 to 18. I competed in competitions, won some awards. I practiced 4 hours a day, sometimes more. Piano was my whole life, and then, Marcus prompted gently. And then I got accepted to Juilliard, Sarah said. The words came out hard, like she was pushing rocks up a hill. Full scholarship. It was my dream. I was supposed to start in the fall, right after I graduated high school. She stopped. This was the hard part. The part that still hurt to talk about, even after 6 years. What happened? Marcus asked softly. My father died, Sarah said flatly, 2 weeks before my high school graduation. Heart attack. He was only 52. He just collapsed at breakfast one morning and never woke up. I'm so sorry, Marcus said, and his voice was full of real sympathy. The medical bills were huge, Sarah continued. My father didn't have good insurance. And my mother, she had her own health problems, diabetes, high blood pressure. She needed care. My younger brother was only 14. Someone had to work, to pay bills, to take care of everyone. That someone was me. So you didn't go to Juilliard, Marcus said. No, Sarah said. I deferred for a year, thinking maybe I could work and save money and still go. But then my mother got worse. She needed more medical care, more expensive medications. My brother needed things for school. There was never enough money. I kept deferring year after year until finally they told me I had waited too long. The scholarship was gone. The spot was gone. The door was closed. And the piano? Marcus asked. I couldn't touch it, Sarah said. Her eyes were starting to burn with tears, but she forced them back. Every time I sat down to play, all I could think about was what I had lost. What I was supposed to become. It hurt too much. So I stopped. I got a job waitressing because the money was decent and the hours were flexible. I've been doing that for 3 years now. But you played last night, Marcus pointed out. I know, Sarah said. I don't know why I said yes. I should have said no. But something in me just couldn't refuse. When you asked for that specific piece, the Chopin Nocturne, it was like the universe was forcing me to face something I had been running from. Do you know why I asked for that specific piece? Marcus asked. Sarah shook her head. It's a piece about longing, Marcus said. About beautiful sadness. About yearning for something that feels just out of reach. When I heard you play it last night, I heard all of that. I heard your story in the music, even though I didn't know your story yet. That's what made it so powerful. Sarah looked down at her coffee mug, blinking hard against the tears that wanted to fall. I need to tell you something else about myself, Marcus said. After I retired from the Metropolitan Orchestra, I didn't just stop working. I started a foundation, the Chen Music Foundation. We identify talented musicians from difficult backgrounds, people who have the skill and passion but not the opportunities or resources. We help them. We fund their education, provide living expenses for them and their families, connect them with teachers and mentors, help them build careers in music. Sarah's head snapped up. She stared at Marcus. Last night I was visiting my daughter who lives in this city. Marcus continued. I went to Romano's because she had recommended it. I asked for someone to play the piano just on a whim, not expecting much. And then you sat down and played, and I knew immediately that I was hearing someone special, someone the foundation could help. What are you saying? Sarah asked, her voice barely a whisper. I'm saying that I want to sponsor your application to the foundation, Marcus said. There's a competitive process. You would need to audition, play for a panel of judges, but I believe you have a strong chance of being accepted. If you are, the foundation would pay for you to attend a conservatory. Any conservatory you want, Juilliard if they'll take you back, or Curtis or Oberlin or any of the other top music schools. We would also provide a stipend for living expenses and financial support for your family, so that you're not carrying that burden alone. Sarah couldn't breathe. She literally couldn't make her lungs work. This was impossible. Things like this didn't happen in real life, not to people like her. I don't understand, she managed to say. Why would you do this? Because talent like yours shouldn't be wasted, Marcus said simply. Because you deserve a chance to become who you were meant to be. Because music needs people who can play with the kind of honesty and emotion you showed last night. But what if I'm not good enough anymore? Sarah said, and now the tears did start to fall. It's been 6 years. 6 years of barely playing. Everyone else at those schools will have been practicing this whole time. They'll be so much better than me. I don't think that's true, Marcus said. Yes, you'll need to practice to rebuild your technique fully. But the core of what makes you special is still there. I heard it last night. The panel of judges will hear it too. My family, Sarah said. My mother needs me. Hi, brother. Your brother is 20 now, isn't he? Marcus said. Old enough to take on more responsibility. And your mother will have the financial support she needs through the foundation. You won't be abandoning them. You'll be giving them and yourself a chance at a better future. Sarah put her face in her hands. This was too much. Too much hope. Too much possibility, too much change all at once. She had spent 6 years building walls around her dreams, making herself okay with a small, safe life. And now this man was taking a sledgehammer to those walls, letting light pour in, showing her that maybe the door wasn't completely closed after all. I need to think, she said through her hands. Of course, Marcus said. This is a big decision. Take your time. But Sarah, look at me. She lowered her hands and looked at him. You're 24 years old, he said. You have so much time ahead of you. Yes, you lost 6 years. That's painful, and I'm not minimizing that pain. But you have decades of possible music making ahead of you. Decades of concerts and performances and the joy of doing what you were born to do. Don't throw that away because you're afraid. He pushed a folder across the table to her. This is information about the foundation, the application process, and the audition requirements. Read through it. Think about it. Call me if you have questions. The next round of auditions is in 3 months. That gives you time to practice, to prepare. Sarah took the folder with shaking hands. It was thick, full of papers and information. Real. Tangible. Not a dream. Thank you, she whispered. Don't thank me yet, Marcus said, smiling. Thank me after you've been accepted and you're back at a piano full-time, doing what you were meant to do. They talked for a little while longer. Marcus told her more about the foundation, about other students they had helped, about the success stories of musicians who had gone on to have wonderful careers. Sarah mostly listened, trying to take it all in, trying to believe this was really happening. Finally, Marcus looked at his watch. I should go. I'm having dinner with my daughter tonight. But Sarah, please think seriously about this. And please call me if you need anything, any help, any advice. I believe in you. I believe you can do this. He stood up and shook her hand, his grip warm and firm. Then he left, and Sarah sat alone at the table with her now cold coffee and the folder that might just change her entire life. She sat there for a long time, staring at the folder, too afraid to open it, too curious not to. Finally, she opened it and started reading. The Foundation's mission statement, the list of services they provided, the requirements for application, the schedule for auditions. It was all real, all possible, all waiting for her if she was brave enough to reach for it. Sarah left Rosie's coffee shop 2 hours later, the folder clutched to her chest. She got in her car but didn't start driving right away. She just sat there, her mind spinning with possibilities and fears and hopes and doubts all tangled together. Could she really do this? Could she walk away from the safe, small life she had built? Could she take this huge risk, this leap into the unknown? What if she failed? What if she wasn't good enough? What if she let Marcus down, let herself down, let everyone down? But another voice in her head, one she barely recognized because it had been silent for so long, was saying something different. What if you succeed? What if you're better than you think? What if this is your one chance, your one shot at the life you always wanted? What if you don't take it and you regret it forever? Sarah started her car and drove home. She had a lot to think about, a lot to decide. But for the first time in 6 years, she had something else too. She had hope. Sarah didn't sleep that night. She lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, watching the shadows from the streetlight outside move across the plaster as cars passed by. The folder from Marcus Chen sat on her nightstand, a physical reminder that her conversation with him hadn't been a dream. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind filled with images. She saw herself on stage at a beautiful concert hall, playing for hundreds of people. She saw herself practicing for hours in a conservatory practice room, surrounded by other dedicated musicians. She saw herself teaching piano to children someday, passing on what she had learned. These were old dreams, dreams she had buried so deep she had almost forgotten they existed. But then other images came. She saw her mother alone in her assisted living facility, struggling to pay bills. She saw her brother having to drop out of college because there wasn't enough money. She saw herself failing the audition, embarrassing Marcus Chen, who had believed in her. She saw herself giving up everything she had built over the past 3 years for nothing, ending up worse off than before. Around 3 in the morning, Sarah gave up on sleeping. She got out of bed and made tea. She sat at her small kitchen table and opened the folder, reading through all the materials carefully this time, absorbing every detail. The audition would require 3 pieces, one from the Baroque period, one from the classical or romantic period, and one piece of the applicant's choice from any era. Each piece needed to be memorized and performed at a professional level. The audition would be in front of a panel of 5 judges, all respected musicians and teachers. They would be looking for technical excellence, but also for musicality, interpretation, and potential. The foundation provided comprehensive support. Full tuition to the conservatory of choice, a monthly stipend of $2,000 for living expenses, an additional family support fund that could provide up to $1,500 per month for dependent family members, access to private teachers and mentors, connections to performance opportunities and competitions. It was more than Sarah had imagined. Much more. If she got accepted, her mother would be taken care of. Her brother could finish college without worrying about money. And Sarah herself would finally be able to pursue music the way she had always wanted to, without the crushing weight of financial responsibility. But the word "if" was huge. If she got accepted, the application materials made it clear that the competition would be fierce. Talented musicians from all over the country would audition. Only 10 students per year were accepted into the program, 10 out of what might be hundreds of applicants. Sarah looked at her hands, turning them over in the dim kitchen light. These hands that had carried trays for 3 years, these hands that smelled like dish soap and restaurant food, could they still make the kind of music that would impress a panel of expert judges? Could they compete with people who had never stopped practicing, never stopped training? She thought about the last time she had really practiced piano seriously. She had been 18 years old, preparing for her high school graduation recital, excited about Juilliard. Her fingers had been strong and flexible then. She could play complicated pieces with ease. Her technique had been sharp and precise. Now she was 24. Her hands were rougher, harder. Her calluses were in the wrong places, from carrying trays instead of playing keys. How long would it take to rebuild her technique? How many hours of practice would she need? And where would she even practice? She didn't own a piano. She couldn't afford to buy one. The small electronic keyboard she had in her closet wasn't good enough for serious practice. As the sun started to rise, Sarah made a decision. She would visit her mother today and talk to her about this. Her mother deserved to know. Her mother had sacrificed so much over the years, had felt guilty about Sarah giving up Juilliard. Maybe hearing about this opportunity would bring her some peace, some hope. Sarah got ready for work, moving through her morning routine automatically. She was scheduled for another double shift, but that was okay. It gave her something to do, something to occupy her mind besides the constant spiral of thoughts about the audition and the foundation and what she should do. At work, people kept asking her about her piano playing. Customers who had been there Thursday night came back and mentioned it. Word was spreading. Mr. Romano asked her twice more if she would consider playing regularly on weekends. Sarah gave vague answers, not ready to commit to anything. During her break between shifts, Sarah called her mother at the assisted living facility. "Mom, can I come visit you today after work? I need to talk to you about something." "Of course, honey," her mother said. Her voice sounded tired. It always sounded tired these days. "Is everything okay?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Everything's fine. I just want to discuss something with you." "You're scaring me, Sarah." "Don't be scared. It's actually something good. I'll explain when I see you." Sarah finished her evening shift and drove to Sunrise Assisted Living, the facility where her mother had lived for the past year. It was a nice enough place, clean and safe, but institutional. The hallways smelled like cleaning products and old carpet. The fluorescent lights were too bright. People shuffled past with walkers, moving slowly, looking tired and resigned. Sarah hated this place. Hated that her mother, who was only 58 years old, had to live here. Her mother's diabetes and other health issues had gotten worse over the years, and she needed more care than Sarah could provide while working full-time. The facility cost almost $3,000 a month, and it took nearly every penny Sarah earned just to pay for it, plus her own rent and bills, plus helping her brother with his college expenses. Her mother was in her room, sitting in the chair by the window, watching the parking lot. She smiled when Sarah came in, and Sarah felt the familiar ache in her chest. Her mother looked older than 58. Sickness and grief had aged her. Her hair was completely gray now, thin and brittle. Her skin was pale, but her smile was still the same smile Sarah remembered from childhood. "Hi, Mom," Sarah said, kissing her mother's cheek. "Hi, sweetheart. You look tired. Are you working too much again?" "I'm always working too much," Sarah said, pulling up another chair. "But I'm okay." They talked for a few minutes about ordinary things. How her mother was feeling. What she had eaten for dinner. What shows she had watched on television. Then Sarah took a deep breath and told her mother about Thursday night. About the customer who asked her to play piano. About performing Chopin's Nocturne. About Marcus Chen and his foundation and the incredible opportunity he was offering. Her mother listened with tears rolling down her face. When Sarah finished talking, her mother reached out and took Sarah's hands in her own thin, weak ones. "You have to do this," her mother said firmly. "But Mom, what about you? What about the money for this place? What about—" "Stop," her mother interrupted. "Sarah, do you know what the worst part of being sick is? It's not the pain. It's not the medications or the doctors or living in this place. It's knowing that I'm the reason you gave up your dreams. That guilt has been eating me alive for 6 years. Mom, it wasn't your fault. Dad died. Someone had to—" "I know," her mother said. "I know someone had to step up. And you did. You've been so strong, so responsible, so good to me and to your brother. But baby, you're 24 years old. You shouldn't be living like this. You should be playing piano. You should be at a conservatory, studying, learning, performing. That's what you were meant to do." "But the foundation might not even accept me," Sarah said. "And if they do, I'll have to move away to wherever the conservatory is. I won't be able to visit you as often. I won't be here if you need me." "I have nurses here," her mother said. "I have doctors. I have everything I need medically. What I don't have is the peace of knowing that my daughter is happy, that she's living the life she was supposed to live. This foundation, this Marcus Chen, it's like a miracle. It's like God or the universe or whatever is giving you a second chance. You can't say no to that." "I'm scared," Sarah admitted, and saying it out loud made her eyes fill with tears. "I'm so scared, Mom. What if I'm not good enough anymore? What if I fail?" "Then you fail," her mother said simply. "But at least you tried. At least you didn't spend the rest of your life wondering what if." "Sarah, I've been alive long enough to know that we don't regret the things we try and fail at. We regret the things we were too afraid to even try." Sarah put her head on her mother's lap and cried. Really cried. For the first time in years. She cried for her father who had died too young. She cried for the 6 years she had lost. She cried for her mother's illness and all the difficulties her family had faced. She cried because she was scared and hopeful at the same time. And that combination of emotions was almost too much to bear. Her mother stroked her hair, the way she used to when Sarah was little. "You're going to do this," her mother said softly. "You're going to practice and prepare and audition, and you're going to be amazing. And even if somehow you don't get accepted, at least you'll have played again. At least you'll have given yourself that gift." Sarah left the facility 2 hours later, after they had talked through all the practical details. Her brother Jake could take on more responsibility. He was 20 now, old enough to help more with their mother's care. "That's the problem," Sarah said. "I don't have a piano. I have a small keyboard, but it's not good enough for serious practice. And I can't afford to buy or rent a real piano right now." "I can help with that," Marcus said immediately. "I have a piano in my house that nobody uses anymore. My wife used to play, but she passed away 3 years ago. It's a good instrument, a Yamaha Grand. You're welcome to come practice on it whenever you need to." Sarah felt overwhelmed by his generosity. "I couldn't impose like that." "It's not an imposition," Marcus said. "I would be honored to help you. The piano should be played. It wants to be played, and I would enjoy hearing you practice. It would bring life back into my house." They arranged for Sarah to come over the next afternoon to see the piano and start working on a practice schedule. When Sarah hung up, she felt like she was floating. This was really happening. She was really going to do this. She spent the rest of Sunday going through her old music books, the ones she had packed away 6 years ago and hadn't looked at since. Sheet music for Bach, Beethoven, Chopin, Rachmaninoff, Debussy. Pieces she had performed, pieces she had loved, pieces she had memorized so thoroughly that she could still see the notes in her mind. She would need to choose her audition pieces carefully. One Baroque piece, maybe Bach's Prelude and Fugue in C major from the Well-Tempered Clavier. One romantic piece, the Chopin Nocturne, obviously, since she had just performed it and it had spoken so deeply to Marcus. And one piece of her choice, maybe something contemporary, something that would show range and versatility. That evening, Sarah called her brother Jake. He was living in a dormitory at the State University studying engineering. Sarah had been helping pay for his expenses, sending him money every month for books and food and other necessities. "Jake, I need to talk to you about something," Sarah said. "What's wrong?" Jake asked immediately. He always assumed the worst when Sarah called unexpectedly. "Nothing's wrong. Something's right, actually." Sarah told him the whole story, just as she had told their mother. Jake was quiet for a long moment after she finished. Then he said, "Sarah, you've been taking care of everyone else for 6 years. It's about time someone took care of you." "But if I do this, I won't be able to send you as much money," Sarah said. "You might need to get a part-time job to help cover your expenses." "I should have gotten a job anyway," Jake said. "I should have been helping more all along." "You've been carrying everything by yourself. That wasn't fair to you." "I wanted to help," Sarah said. "You're my brother, and you're my sister, and I want you to be happy," Jake said. "Do this, Sarah. Please follow your dream. I'll be fine. Mom will be fine. We'll all be fine. You've made sure of that. Now it's time for you to do something for yourself." After she hung up with Jake, Sarah sat in her quiet apartment and felt something shift inside her. Her family was giving her permission to pursue this. More than permission. They were encouraging her, supporting her, believing in her. The only person who didn't believe in her was herself. Sarah thought about what her mother had said. About regret, about not trying being worse than trying and failing. She thought about Marcus Chen hearing something special in her playing, something worth investing in. She thought about Thursday night, about how alive she had felt at the piano, how much like herself. She opened her laptop and started researching conservatories. Curtis Institute of Music in Philadelphia, Oberlin Conservatory in Ohio, New England Conservatory in Boston, and Juilliard, of course, in New York. Each one had different strengths, different programs, different opportunities. The audition was 3 months away. 12 weeks, Sarah calculated in her head. If she practiced 3 hours a day, that was 21 hours per week, about 84 hours per month, around 250 hours total before the audition. Was that enough? Professional musicians practiced much more than that, but Sarah was starting from a difficult place. She still needed to work to pay her bills. She couldn't practice full-time, not yet. But 250 hours was better than 0 hours. 250 hours was something. And who knew? Maybe muscle memory would kick in faster than she expected. Maybe her fingers would remember more than she thought they would. Sarah made a plan. She would reduce her hours at Romano's, cutting out some of the double shifts. She would practice every morning before work and every evening after work. She would spend her Sundays at Marcus's house, putting in longer practice sessions. She would rebuild her technique step by step, piece by piece, note by note. It wouldn't be easy. Nothing worth doing was ever easy. But Sarah was no stranger to hard work. She had been working hard for 6 years. At least now she would be working hard towards something she actually wanted, something that mattered to her. She called Mr. Romano the next morning and asked if she could reduce her shifts. She explained that she was pursuing a music opportunity and needed more time to practice. Mr. Romano was disappointed but understanding. He agreed to let her work 4 shifts per week instead of 6. It would mean less money. But the foundation's application materials mentioned a small pre-audition stipend for applicants who needed financial help during the preparation period. Sarah would apply for that. Everything was falling into place. It was terrifying and exhilarating, and it felt like standing on the edge of a cliff, not knowing if she would fall or fly. That afternoon, Sarah drove to Marcus Chen's house. He lived in a beautiful neighborhood with old trees and well-maintained houses. His home was a large 2-story colonial with a wraparound porch and a garden full of late-season flowers. Marcus welcomed her warmly and led her to the living room. There, in the corner by a large window, sat the most beautiful piano Sarah had ever seen. It was a Yamaha Grand, black and gleaming, perfectly maintained. Seeing it took her breath away. "Go ahead," Marcus said, gesturing toward it. "Play something." Sarah approached the piano slowly, almost reverently. She sat down on the bench and placed her hands on the keys. They felt cool and smooth under her fingers. She took a breath and began to play a Bach prelude, one of the simpler ones, just to warm up. The piano's sound was rich and clear. Each note rang out perfectly. Her fingers felt awkward at first, stumbling over passages that used to be easy, but as she played, they started to remember. They started to find their way. Marcus sat in an armchair listening with his eyes closed and a small smile on his face. When Sarah finished, he opened his eyes. "You have a long way to go," he said honestly. "Your technique needs work. You'll need to rebuild your strength and flexibility. But the musicality is there, Sarah. The soul is there. Everything else can be practiced and improved. But that special quality that makes someone a true musician, you have that. Don't ever doubt it." Sarah felt tears prick her eyes again. She seemed to cry so easily these days now that she had opened up this part of herself again. "Now," Marcus said, standing up, "let's talk about your practice schedule and your audition pieces. We have 3 months and we need to use every day wisely." For the next 2 hours, Marcus helped Sarah plan her preparation. They chose her 3 audition pieces, discussed what areas of technique she needed to focus on, and mapped out a practice schedule. Marcus also gave her the name of an excellent piano teacher who worked with the foundation's applicants, someone who could provide weekly lessons to help her prepare. When Sarah left Marcus's house that evening, she felt something she hadn't felt in 6 years. She felt like a musician again. Not a waitress who used to play piano. A musician, someone whose life revolved around music, whose identity was wrapped up in creating beautiful sounds. The next morning, Sarah woke up at 5 a.m., an hour earlier than usual. She made coffee, then sat down at her small electronic keyboard, not ideal, but it would work for basic practice when she couldn't get to Marcus's piano. She put on headphones so she wouldn't bother her neighbors, and she began to practice scales and arpeggios, the fundamental exercises that would rebuild her technique. Her fingers ached after just 30 minutes. They weren't used to this kind of work anymore. But she pushed through, practicing for a full hour before she had to get ready for work. This became her new routine. Practice for an hour before work. Work her shift at Romano's. Practice for 2 hours after work at Marcus's house. On Sundays, practice for 6 or 7 hours, taking breaks only to rest her hands and eat. The first week was brutal. Her hands cramped. Her back ached from sitting at the piano bench. She felt frustrated by all the things she couldn't play well anymore, all the passages that had become difficult. There were moments when she wanted to give up, when she thought this was impossible, that she had waited too long, that she should just accept her life as a waitress and stop dreaming of anything more. But then she would remember her mother's words. "At least you tried. At least you didn't spend your life wondering what if." And she would sit back down at the piano and practice another hour. 3 months passed in a blur of piano keys and sheet music and aching muscles and small victories. Sarah practiced until her fingers bled. Literally, she had to buy special bandages to cover the blisters that formed from hours of practice. Her hands, which had been soft from 6 years away from serious playing, had to redevelop their calluses in the right places. Every day was a battle between her body wanting to rest and her mind pushing her to practice just 1 more hour. Just 1 more passage, just 1 more time through the difficult section. Marcus had introduced her to Professor Helena Vargas, a renowned piano teacher who specialized in preparing students for auditions. Professor Vargas was in her 60s with iron gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp dark eyes that missed nothing. She was demanding and uncompromising, but also brilliant. Every week, Sarah would have a lesson with Professor Vargas in a small studio near downtown. The professor would sit in a chair beside the piano, watching Sarah's every movement, listening to every note. She corrected everything: hand position, posture, pedaling technique, the angle of Sarah's wrists, the way she shaped phrases, how she used dynamics. Nothing escaped her attention. Again, Professor Vargas would say over and over, "Your 4th finger is weak. Practice those scales with emphasis on the 4th finger. Again, that phrase needs more shape. Think of it as a question, not a statement. Again, your left hand is rushing. Listen to the balance." Again. Sometimes Sarah left those lessons feeling defeated, overwhelmed by how much work she still needed to do. But other times she left feeling energized, excited by the progress she was making, by the improvements Professor Vargas pointed out, and she was improving. Slowly, painfully, but definitely. Her fingers were getting stronger. Her technique was becoming more reliable. The pieces were starting to feel secure in her hands. The Bach prelude and fugue that had seemed impossible in the first week was now flowing smoothly. The Chopin Nocturne, which she had played reasonably well that first night at the restaurant, was now truly polished, with every phrase carefully shaped, every dynamic thoughtfully chosen. For her third piece, the one of her own choice, she had selected Rachmaninoff's Prelude in C-sharp minor. It was a bold choice, a dramatic and technically demanding piece that would show the judges her range. Professor Vargas had raised her eyebrows when Sarah suggested it. "That's an ambitious piece for someone who hasn't practiced seriously in 6 years, the professor had said. "I know," Sarah replied, "but I played it when I was 18 for my graduation recital. It was one of my best performances, and I want to show them I can handle big romantic repertoire, not just the smaller, more intimate pieces." Professor Vargas had nodded slowly. "All right, let's see what you can do with it." The Rachmaninoff was a beast. It required power, control, and incredible stamina. Sarah's hands would shake with exhaustion after running through it. But gradually, over weeks of practice, she built up the strength and endurance she needed. The piece began to feel possible, then comfortable, then exciting. Sarah's life had completely transformed. She still worked at Romano's, but only 4 shifts per week now. The rest of her time was consumed by piano. She practiced at Marcus's house every day. She had her weekly lessons with Professor Vargas. She listened to recordings of great pianists performing her pieces, studying their interpretations, learning from their choices. Marcus became more than just a benefactor. He became a mentor and friend. Sometimes he would sit and listen to her practice, offering gentle suggestions based on his decades of experience in the music world. Other times he would make her tea and they would talk about music, about life, about the challenges of pursuing art in a world that didn't always value it. "You remind me of my wife," Marcus said one afternoon, as Sarah took a break from practicing. She had that same fierce determination, that same willingness to work until her hands hurt. "She would have liked you very much." Sarah learned that Marcus's wife had been a pianist too, a teacher who had devoted her life to nurturing young talent. She had passed away from cancer 3 years ago, and Marcus had started the foundation partly in her memory, to continue the work she had loved. "I miss hearing piano in this house," Marcus admitted. "Your practicing has brought something back that I thought was gone forever. So please don't ever feel like you're imposing. You're giving me a gift too." Sarah's family supported her in their own ways. Her mother called every few days to check on her progress, to encourage her, to tell her she was proud. Jake sent funny text messages between his classes, memes about musicians and jokes about pianists. It wasn't much, but it helped Sarah feel less alone in this enormous undertaking. The hardest part wasn't the physical practice. It was the mental battle. Every day doubt crept in. Every day fear whispered in her ear, "You're not good enough. You've waited too long. Everyone else will be better than you. You're going to embarrass yourself and disappoint everyone who believes in you." But Sarah had learned something important over those 3 months. She learned that you don't wait until you feel brave to do brave things. You do brave things while feeling terrified, and that's what makes them brave. Every morning when she sat down to practice, she was afraid. Every lesson with Professor Vargas, she was nervous. But she did it anyway. 2 weeks before the audition, Professor Vargas had Sarah perform all 3 pieces straight through, as if it were the real audition. Sarah was so nervous her hands shook as she began the Bach. But once she started playing, the music took over. She moved through all 3 pieces, concentrating intensely, giving everything she had. When she finished, there was a long silence. Then Professor Vargas stood up and did something she had never done before. She hugged Sarah. "You're ready," the professor said simply. "You're absolutely ready." Sarah burst into tears. 3 months of pressure and fear and hard work came pouring out. Professor Vargas held her and let her cry, saying nothing, just patting her back the way a mother would. The audition was being held in a concert hall at the local university. Sarah drove there on a cold Saturday morning in February, exactly 3 months and 2 weeks after that Thursday night when she had played the Chopin Nocturne at Romano's. Marcus offered to drive her, but Sarah said she needed to do this alone, to have some quiet time to prepare herself mentally. She arrived an hour early. There were already other applicants there, most of them younger than her. Some looked barely 18, fresh out of high school, with expensive instrument cases and designer clothes. They clustered in groups talking about their teachers and their previous competitions. Sarah stood apart from them, feeling old and out of place. A young man approached her. He looked about 20, with messy dark hair and kind eyes. "First time auditioning for the Chen Foundation?" he asked. "Yes," Sarah said. "Me too. I'm nervous as hell." "I'm Daniel, by the way." Sarah, they talked for a few minutes. Daniel was a violinist from California who had been playing since he was 4. He came from a musical family, but didn't have the money to attend a top conservatory without help. The foundation was his only hope. "What instrument do you play?" Daniel asked. "Piano," Sarah said. "Oh man, the piano competition is brutal," Daniel said. "So many piano applicants every year. But you must be good if you got this far. Good luck." He wandered off to talk to other people, and Sarah was alone again with her thoughts. She sat down in a corner and closed her eyes, trying to calm her racing heart. She ran through her pieces mentally, hearing them in her head, feeling her fingers moving on imaginary keys. "Sarah Mitchell?" Sarah opened her eyes. A woman with a clipboard was calling her name. It was her turn. Sarah stood up, her legs feeling weak and shaky. She followed the woman down a hallway and through a door into the concert hall. It was a beautiful space with wooden floors and high ceilings and rows of red velvet seats. At the front of the hall was a magnificent grand piano gleaming under the stage lights. 5 judges sat in the front row, spread out with space between them. They had papers and pens in front of them. Sarah recognized 2 of them from research she had done. One was a famous concert pianist who had performed all over the world. Another was the dean of a prestigious conservatory. The others she didn't know, but they all looked serious and accomplished and intimidating. Marcus was not among them. He had told her he couldn't be a judge because of his personal connection to her, but that he had full confidence in the panel's ability to judge fairly. "Good morning, Miss Mitchell," said the woman in the center, who appeared to be the head judge. She was probably in her 50s with elegant silver hair and a warm smile that made Sarah feel slightly less terrified. "I'm Dr. Patricia Morrison. We're very glad you're here. Please take a moment to adjust the bench and prepare yourself. Then you may begin with your Baroque selection." Sarah walked to the piano on legs that didn't quite feel like her own. She sat on the bench and adjusted it slightly. She looked at the keys, black and white and perfect, waiting for her. She placed her hands in position for the Bach prelude and fugue. This was it. This was the moment. Everything she had worked for over the past 3 months came down to the next 20 minutes. All the practice, all the pain, all the doubt, all the hope. It all lived in her fingers now, waiting to come out through the piano. This was it. The Rachmaninoff. The big dramatic piece that would either prove she belonged here or prove she had aimed too high. Sarah placed her hands on the keys, feeling her heart pound in her chest. The opening chord of the Rachmaninoff crashed out, loud and ominous. The piece began with dark, heavy bass notes like bells tolling. Then the melody entered, passionate and intense. This piece required everything from her: power, delicacy, technical brilliance, emotional depth. It was a showcase of everything a pianist could do. Sarah threw herself into it completely. Her whole body was involved, not just her fingers. She swayed with the music, leaned into the loud sections, pulled back for the soft moments. Her hands flew across the keys, executing the rapid passages that had taken weeks to master. Sweat formed on her forehead from the physical exertion. The piece built to its dramatic climax, where both hands had to play huge crashing chords that filled the entire hall with sound. Sarah played them with confidence and strength, her arms and hands working together to create the massive volume Rachmaninoff had intended. Then, suddenly, the music pulled back. It became soft and questioning, uncertain. This was one of Sarah's favorite moments in the piece, where all the drama disappeared and what was left was just a simple, vulnerable melody. She played it with tender care, barely touching the keys. The piece ended with a return to those dark, heavy chords from the beginning. Sarah played the final notes with finality and certainty. Then she lifted her hands from the keys and sat very still, breathing hard from the effort. The silence in the hall seemed to last forever. Then the judges began writing again, their pens scratching on paper. Sarah stood up from the bench, her legs wobbling slightly. She felt drained, exhausted, empty. She had given everything she had. There was nothing left. "Thank you, Miss Mitchell," Dr. Morrison said. Her face was still neutral, impossible to read. "You'll receive our decision within 2 weeks. You may go now." Sarah walked out of the hall in a daze. In the hallway, other applicants were waiting for their turns, looking nervous and excited. Daniel gave her a thumbs up. "How did it go?" he asked. I don't know, Sarah said honestly. I really don't know. She drove home and collapsed on her couch, still wearing her audition clothes. She felt numb. It was over. All the preparation, all the work, all the hope and fear. It was done. Now all she could do was wait. The next 2 weeks were torture. Every day felt like a year. Sarah went to work at Romano's trying to focus on her job, but her mind was always somewhere else. She kept replaying the audition in her head, analyzing every mistake, every moment where she could have done better. She convinced herself she had failed. The judges had probably hated her playing. They had probably laughed after she left, wondering why Marcus had even recommended her. Professor Vargas called to check on her. "Stop torturing yourself," the professor said firmly. "You played beautifully. I heard a recording of your audition. They record all of them for their files, and Dr. Morrison is an old friend who sent it to me. You did everything right. Now you need to trust the process and wait." "But what if—" Sarah began. "No," Professor Vargas interrupted. "No what ifs. You did your best. That's all anyone can ever do. Now you wait and you keep living your life." Marcus called too, offering encouragement and support. "Whatever happens, I want you to know I'm proud of you," he said. "You've worked so hard. You've come so far. Win or lose, you've already accomplished something remarkable." But Sarah didn't want to lose. She wanted this so badly it hurt. She wanted it more than she had wanted anything in years, maybe in her whole life. The thought of getting a rejection letter was almost unbearable. Exactly 2 weeks after the audition, on a Tuesday afternoon, Sarah came home from her morning shift to find an envelope in her mailbox. A thick, cream-colored envelope with the Chen Music Foundation's logo in the corner. Her hands shook so badly she could barely hold it. She stood in the hallway outside her apartment staring at the envelope, too afraid to open it. A thin envelope would mean rejection, but this was thick. Thick meant there were materials inside, documents, information. Thick might mean good news, or it might just mean they sent everyone a detailed rejection letter. Sarah forced herself to open the envelope. She pulled out several sheets of paper. The first one was a letter on official foundation letterhead. She made herself read the first line. "Dear Miss Mitchell, on behalf of the Chen Music Foundation Selection Committee, it is my great pleasure to inform you that you have been accepted into our program for the upcoming academic year." Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She had to read the sentence 3 times before the words made sense. Accepted. She had been accepted. She sank down to the floor of the hallway, still holding the letter, and cried. These weren't sad tears or scared tears. These were tears of pure, overwhelming relief and joy. She had done it. Against all odds, after 6 years away from serious music, after thinking her dreams were dead and buried, she had done it. The letter continued with details. She had been awarded a full scholarship to the conservatory of her choice. The foundation recommended Juilliard, Curtis, or New England Conservatory based on her performance and stated goals. She would receive a monthly stipend of $2,000 for personal expenses, plus $1,500 per month in family support funds to help care for her mother. There were more papers, forms to fill out, a list of conservatories to choose from, information about the foundation's mentorship program and performance opportunities. It was all real, all official, all happening. Sarah called Marcus first. He answered on the first ring as if he had been waiting by the phone. "I got in," she said, her voice shaking. "Marcus, I got in." She heard him make a sound that might have been a laugh or a sob or both. "I knew you would," he said. "I knew it from that very first night when I heard you play." "Congratulations, Sarah. I'm so incredibly happy for you." Next, she called her mother. Her mother cried so hard she couldn't speak for several minutes. Finally, she managed to say, "Your father would be so proud. He's watching, baby. I know he is, and he's so proud of you." Then she called Jake, who whooped so loudly she had to hold the phone away from her ear. "That's my sister," he yelled to someone in his dorm. "My sister just got into a major music program. She's going to be famous." Sarah laughed through her tears. "I'm not going to be famous, Jake." "You will be," he said confidently. "Just wait. You'll see." That evening, Sarah went to Romano's for her scheduled shift, but she asked to speak to Mr. Romano first. She found him in his office going over paperwork. "Mr. Romano, I need to give you my notice," she said. "I've been accepted into a music program. I'll be moving away to study at a conservatory." Mr. Romano looked up and his face broke into a huge smile. "Sarah, that's wonderful. When do you leave?" "I have about 2 months before the program starts." I can work until then if you need me. Of course I need you, Mr. Romano said, coming around his desk to hug her. But I'm so happy for you. You deserve this. Ever since that night when you played the piano, I knew you were meant for something bigger than this restaurant. Go follow your dreams, Sarah, and come back and play for us again sometime when you're famous. There was that word again. Famous. Sarah didn't care about being famous. She just wanted to play music, to study and learn and grow as a musician, but she smiled and nodded. Over the next 2 months, Sarah made preparations for her new life. She applied to several conservatories and was accepted by all of them, but she ultimately chose Juilliard. It had been her original dream 6 years ago, and now, impossibly, she was getting a second chance at it. She found a small apartment near the school that she would share with another student. She packed up her few belongings. She helped arrange additional care for her mother through the foundation's support network. She said goodbye to Professor Vargas, who told her to work hard and never forget what she had learned during these intense 3 months of preparation. The hardest goodbye was to Marcus. He had given her so much: belief, support, encouragement, access to his piano, his time, his wisdom. She didn't know how to thank him adequately. You don't need to thank me, Marcus said when she tried. Watching you work these past months, hearing you play, seeing you grow, that's been my reward. Just promise me you'll keep playing with that honesty and emotion. Don't let the technical training make you forget how to feel the music. That's what makes you special. I promise, Sarah said. On her last day at Romano's, the staff threw her a small going-away party. Maria made her a cake. Tommy gave her a card signed by everyone. Several regular customers came in just to say goodbye and wish her luck. And at the end of the night, Mr. Romano asked her to play one more time on the restaurant piano. Sarah sat down at the familiar instrument where everything had changed 3 months ago. She played the Chopin Nocturne one last time, the piece that had unlocked the door to her future. But this time it felt different. She wasn't playing it in fear or doubt. She was playing it in gratitude and hope, looking backward at how far she had come and forward at where she was going. When she finished, the restaurant erupted in applause. Sarah stood and bowed, tears streaming down her face, overwhelmed by how much her life had transformed. 3 months ago, she had been a waitress with sore feet and buried dreams.